right, well, we're going to dive in because the first 20, 30 minutes or so is going to be a slide presentation sharing some different artwork with you. And then the second half of the demo will be actually going in and drawing and doing some vision development. So, vision development, let's get this. So, I'm totally bouncing off the word visual development for this presentation because the same tools apply in vision development as visual development. The difference is that one is more around narrative and more imaginative worlds, and then vision development is actually going to be linked to our world and actually down to where you live. That's where we're going to start, is in re-envisioning your neighborhood, maybe even your house or your room, kind of like that designing a dream bedroom assignment you get sometimes in art classes. So this is a painting I did trying to depict the thinness of our atmosphere. You know, they say that the atmosphere around Earth is about as thick as a varnish, on a painting. So our atmosphere is pretty strong, but it's also delicate. And we'll be talking a lot about carbon today because our vision designs will need to factor in carbon first and foremost. Okay. So again, this is concept art for resilience and sustainability. I will give a little background. I'm an illustrator. This isn't my work. This is my work. I'm an illustrator. I do matte painting for entertainment, and one of my goals is to be a layout artist, layout designer for animation. So it's been really fun using those techniques for this process. Okay, so this is an awesome artwork from 1902, flying cars, and really cool fashion. I love this guy with just like a sword driving around in his cape with his helmet. And there's a party going on here. Party bus looks like. Just really fun art. And this is a historical example of artists doing visual or vision development, reimagining or imagining a future that's very different from our own. A point I'm going to hammer home a lot is that you guys as artists have a visual superpower, and the subject we're covering today is very difficult to grasp, but you have a remarkable power to visualize new worlds, okay? And so you can create new visions designed around your community's needs. Here we have the Jetsons, more flying cars. This is a very optimistic vision of the future, really fun. I love looking at how they painted these. Even how all their ellipses may not be perfect, they're almost like oval ellipses. It's just really fun. And then big spaceships. A lot of science fiction artists envision intergalactic empires, civilizations, things like that. This is from Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. But these artworks kind of beg the question, why did they leave Earth? Was it because they were able to sustain, or they had to run away from Earth? Here we have The Fifth Element. I just love this movie. I don't know if any of you enjoy this movie, but it's got great visual development. It's a super fun movie. And I love how when these cars fly around, they make tire noises. And so it's a great example of artists envisioning a new world. This looks like New York City on steroids. Okay, here is a ring world. And ring worlds represent the pinnacle of sci-fi. It's a world that wraps around an entire sun and can harvest the energy from that. And the
Holy crap, what is that?
isn't that crazy? It's a ring world. A-
I don't know, I just joined
You
the
just joined
screen and
in.
your share screen looks crazy.
And again, let me know if there's any issues with the stream. I'm running on a hotspot right now. So you can see there's a whole climate system wrapped around a giant ring. It would cost a ton of carbon to produce this. So beautiful, imaginative design, utopian, really fun. I love ring worlds. They're very cool. And here's another one from the 80s. Uh, kind of low res. I apologize about that, but just fantastic kind of imagination, putting entire civilization inside of this torus donut kind of form. One thing we're going to talk about is that science fiction artists usually address issues of their times, and so these artists were really fascinated by space race, Cold War, nuclear issues, things like that. And so I encourage you as artists, if you have an interest in science fiction, to read up on climate change and how that's going to shape the world building um, in narrative stories. This is a climate fiction book that I really enjoyed called New York 2140, and it envisions the future of New York. The sea level rise, buildings have walkways to interconnect them during storms, there are solar boats, rooftop gardens. It's a bit utopian and fantastical, but I thought this cover was a great example of the direction that this vision development lecture is going. And this is one of my own paintings called Sink or Swim. And I made this in 2016 when I was feeling really depressed about the climate, and I kind of felt like we, as humanity, we either rise to the occasion and plan a new future, or we're going to be part of the next great extinction. So a lot of emotions bundled up in here, but we're going to be focusing on solutions today. And that's another thing, is like, as artists who have the ability to visualize better than almost anyone, whatever you choose to visualize, I think, is very important. I think each of your individual visions is really important. So let's just address cause and impact of climate change. People may have various understandings of the causes and impacts, but let's just do a run through. Again, this is research that's going to inform our design. So as designers, we need to have a full understanding of the scenario here. This is part of the art Bible in a way, or the research Bible. Okay, so this is, now please ask questions as well if you guys have any. I have references at the end of this slideshow, and you guys will have access to all that as well. So this is historical carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuels and industry. So on this axis here, the vertical axis, we have emissions in million metric tons, and then we have the year. And so you can see the start of the Industrial Revolution coming up, new technologies, more industry. 1800s is when things start really picking up. Before that, still DIY culture for the most part. And then, World War II, we see a giant surge all the way through up to the present day. Now, what's causing this? One of the main reasons for this is that fossil fuels are cheap and relatively easy. So when things are cheap and easy, people just go with the flow. So we've just been going with the flow in terms of burning fuel. So here we have carbon pollution. It's showing how it's going to shake up our stable climate, relatively stable. So on the vertical axis, we have temperature changes in degrees Fahrenheit. And this is relative to 1961 to 1990. That's important. All of this graphing here is relative to this period of time. This is, oh, and then this is the year it changes. So this is when humans started to develop agriculture, anthropologists think. So humans maybe only invented agriculture because the climate was relatively stable across this period. This period is called the Holocene. And climate does change all the time. It's changed all throughout Earth's history. But this is a period of extraordinary stability in the climate. You know, there's ice ages before this, on and off. But then we get to here, we start burning all this fuel, and the temperatures are just shooting up. You know, the temperature increase globally is higher than it has been in the last 10,000 years, and it's going to get much higher. If we can stop at 2 degrees Fahrenheit, that would be amazing. It's still pretty catastrophic. I think we all are seeing how weak some of our global supply chains can be, and this will disrupt global supply chains. This will cause a lot of homelessness and climate refugees. 4 degrees is worse. 6 degrees is really bad. 8 degrees is like, they think the climate may actually plateau. It might stabilize itself before 8 degrees, but 8 degrees is like extinction level, like humans living in the ground type things, type scenarios. So if we have a very slim shot of hitting this, if we do, that would be amazing. So that's what we're shooting for in this demo today. Now, some of this stuff can get a little heavy. We'll get positive soon, I promise. But this chart is personal for me because it shows global temperature trends increasing. Where it's gray, they don't have data. So it's not that it's staying the same, it's just they weren't able to collect data. We do know the Arctic is heating faster than anywhere else, and the oceans are also heating a lot. This graph here shows 1988 to 2017. So this shows how in the past 30 or so years, things are accelerating much faster than they have been before. We remember this chart, and we remember this chart. Things are accelerating. And so for people born 1988 and later, the climate has changed faster in your lifetime than at any other period in any other human's lifetime. Okay, why? Well, fossil fuels, plants and animals die, they sink into the ground, they get compressed over millions of years. Then humans find ways to dig them up, burn them, and we get awesome power from that. Awesome enough to just dig like giant. It's hard to understand the scale, you know. There's this little crane in here. That's probably a massive crane. The reason I'm showing tar sands is that it costs 4 times as much carbon to dig up this oil because it's sticky and gritty and you have to refine it. It's a really dirty, messy process. This is on the edge of the tar sands in Alberta. And to me, this illustrates how it's not just about temperature change, it's also about environmental damage. And so we're seeing in Brazil, where there's deforestation, a lot of different places. This is about ecocide too. It's not just about climate, it's about how do humans interact with their environment? How do we treat the world around us? All right, I think Angela posted this in the paint reference. This is a picture of Shanghai. And you can see the air pollution. And this is a result of all that burning of fuel, cheap fuel. I can't remember exactly how many times people, when we were plein air painting in LA, going out before everything went down, people would comment on the atmosphere, oh man, the pollution be thick today. So it's real, and it's not just how it looks. New research has come out cities with higher amounts of particulate in the air are experiencing higher COVID-related deaths because of the respiratory relationship. So the climate change is a health issue too. So we'll be trying to design our neighborhoods to be healthier air-wise also. I just love this picture of LA traffic. It just looks like a string of beads, jewels across the landscape. And I know for those of you who are in LA, you know that most of these cars are single passenger, right? And so there's incredible freedom with the car, but there's kind of incredible pollution as well. And actually not that much freedom because you're basically just sitting side by side with people anyways. Hurricane Katrina, natural disasters are a result. So thinking about your local area, what are the kind of extreme weather events in your area, and how would you design your neighborhood to be more resilient to that? Part of this is that climate change is going to disproportionately affect poorer people. People least able to deal with climate change are going to be the most impacted. So we have to design around that. This is Paradise, just really, really tragic. Paradise, California. Forest fires. Deepwater Horizon. It's kind of an epic photo to study, just visually, but what's happening here when you think about it, we have tons of carbon burning up into the air, spilling out into the ocean, and in order to clean up that carbon mess, we have to use more carbon. We've got to bring all these boats out, helicopters, deep sea equipment, continual cleanup crews. So one thing we're talking about a lot in our design are feedback loops. You know, when you have a carbon intense system that goes wrong, it costs more carbon to maintain it. So how can we just cut that feedback loop off? We're not going to go too much into animals, but again, ecocide is a real thing. So maybe including animals and positive messages with animals in your design could be really cool. All right, this is a piece I did. This is maybe one of my darkest pieces thinking about climate change. It's called What Were Trees Like? And it's just about the idea of how the changes in our climate are moving faster than most things are used to. And this could be like, a worst case vision. And I think it's okay to do dark, expressive pieces. We'll talk about climate grief at the end of the lecture as well. That's a real thing. But let's go on to solutions. So what can we do about this? And specifically, what can you as artists do? Because you really do have a superpower being able to visualize worlds that most people can't. And I think sometimes we take that for granted that we can do that. So let's use a slice of that to build a better future here. So mitigation and adaptation is how we're going to do that. Can I ask, has anyone heard of donut economics or this donut economic system before? Nope. Okay. So our economic system is very linear right now. We harvest materials, we manufacture them, we sell them, and then we throw them away. It's a very poorly designed system. So this is donut economics, and there's a great book on it. Check it out. This is the ecological ceiling, where if we push too far, we start to damage the environment in ways that also hurt us. And then on the inside here is the social foundation. So this is what we need to survive. In between is where our design lies. So again, we're kind of building all of this up for our design prompt in terms of vision development. This is a safe and just space for humanity. It's regenerative and distributive. Right now, we're overshooting. We are acidifying the ocean. We are changing the climate. We're depleting ozone. We're polluting air that we breathe. We're extincting animals. More and more land is being developed. We're pulling more water from our aquifers than we return, and snowpack is reduced. If you're in California, snowpack is a big issue. We're putting too much nitrogen and phosphorus into our land through farming, and we're polluting stuff as well with chemicals. We are also shortfalling. We're not doing, like, people are still starving. People are still looking for clean water. People are without energy. People don't have access to important networks. You know, in our artist circles, we think about this a lot. Connecting with other artists. Not everyone has the same opportunities to connect. Housing shortages, gender equality shortages, social equality, political voice, peace and justice, income and work, education. Okay, so there's a lot to work on. But what this means is that these are all opportunities to pivot your design off of. You can have designs that focus on education. You can have designs that focus on energy or gender equality. So really, crisis is a form of opportunity, and this is a really useful tool for your design. Sorry about the low quality image here. We're going to get into real examples. So this is Betsy Damon, her Living Water project. She built this in China, I believe in the 80s, with local collaboration. It's an eco park that is designed to filter water from this once filthy river, and it actually teaches community members about the process too. So when you visit, it's educational as well as actually functional. This is a great example of vision development actually being implemented. This is just a sci-fi piece that I enjoyed. I like how they're using a little bit of photography and painting and maybe some 3D, solar, wind, just toying with solutions. Maybe this is existing water tower that's been retrofitted. I just like that image. This is another type of visualization where an artist is kind of doing an augmented reality thing where they take a picture of what is and what could be. So just by changing our diet, you know, with the Lansing diet, for instance, which has some meat and fish, but it's veggie heavy, you can reduce a lot of methane, a lot of carbon. And these are just fun visualizations, you know. This would be a great exercise to go out in your area and sketch what you see, and then maybe do another sketch of what you would want to see. Okay, other really practical, easy to do, feasible things. These are things that we just haven't done because fossil fuels are cheap and easy. But growing food independence, urban gardening, teaching kids how to grow food, it prevents food deserts, it decreases transportation, and it empowers people. I don't know if any of you have grown your own vegetables, but it can be hard, but it can be really satisfying as well. This man is Ron Finley, and he is spearheading urban gardening in Los Angeles, South Central LA, using these curbsides to plant gardens. Now the city tried to stop him at first because, you know, there's regulation, but he worked through that, and he's famous now for just creating an awesome garden, taking up a lot of space and spreading the good word about this too. A big issue in LA are food deserts, not having access to good fresh produce, and also urban heat island. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of urban heat islands, but in cities with a lot of cement, it gets hot. You put more green space in there, you don't have to use as much AC, you don't have to burn as much carbon. Germany. When I visited Germany in 2014, I was amazed at how many solar panels they had and how many cities had separate garden houses. So the culture there is already really on top of growing their own food, energy independence. So again, these things are not, what we're talking about today is not crazy science fiction. We have all the technology we could ever need to do this. Vertical gardening, growing up. Lots of cool design possibilities here. More integration of plants with architecture. I like how this just cascades down the building, flows down. A tram, I bring up the tramway because Los Angeles was originally designed with a lot of trams. Now, it was much smaller back then, but it just goes to show that an entire city can be transformed. And in fact, many cities have already been transformed multiple times, from horse to tram to automobile to maybe something more sustainable in the future. Maybe bicycles. This is a photo from a critical mass protest. This is where bikers, like thousands of bikers, get together and just flood a highway, and they just take up the highway. And it's a demonstration of low tech versus high tech, a form of protest. And I just love this photo from New York. I don't know if it's actual color photography or if it was hand colored. It looks like real color photography, like early color. And hanging your clothes out to dry. It seems stupidly simple to me, but we don't do this, you know, and mainly because the air is so dirty in LA. That's probably why. But this saves a lot of carbon. Instead of using a washing or drying machine, we've got free sunlight, so much free sunlight. Okay, and so this is an early sketch I did in college. I was living in Milwaukee, and there were a lot of vacant car garages. So I tried to imagine what would cornfields look like planted in those garages. So this is a little pen sketch I made. And then here's another piece I did called Tortoise Terrarium, and it's just a more fun, playful concept. The idea is that the weather's gotten so bad that the garden has to move, and this tortoise just walks around transporting the food, giving it the best ecosystem it needs. Okay. So now we're going to get into vision development workflow. This is the actual process. It's very similar to VizDev, except it's a little more tied down to hard reality. So it's a little less fun in that way, to be honest, but nonetheless important. So visualizing climate change. This is the book I'm basing my whole lecture off of. It's a long, boring textbook, but it's super rich with information, and I shouldn't say it's boring. It's actually really interesting. It's just hard to read a lot about climate. It just gets difficult. So we're going to pull all the really cool techniques that he talks about in this book. The first thing he says to do is start locally. So for me, that's Los Angeles. And you can see on these mountains here where the green is, and then once you hit the cement, it just, it's flat and cemented all over. Now, LA is pretty well off in terms of climate going forward for the next 50 years or so. The forest fires are really bad. The water issues are really bad, but sea level rise won't be as impactful as someplace like New York or Miami. So our scenario, the scenario I'm going to be designing around today is going to be different than how you would design yours. Okay. Once you start locally, the second step is to see carbon. We have to learn to see the carbon that we take for granted every day and that we just don't recognize, because these are systems designed around really cheap fuel. And that cheap fuel, that cheap fossil fuel, is not going to be around forever, or the weather's going to get, the climate's going to get so bad that people agree that we need to change to a new system. So, cars, number one, pretty carbon heavy, the whole system around cars. How to design a carless LA, that's a challenge that I think we should all just try for fun. But for now, we're just identifying the problem. Rooftop spaces, all this empty space. Could be green space, could be generating electricity. Instead, there's air conditioning units to cool. So we have no shade, no shelter, and lots of carbon-heavy air conditioning units to keep it cool. I did circle some green areas where there are mitigating aspects. Next step is go outside with your camera, take a bunch of photos. This is just a really rough photo collage I stitched together. I guess I could have done panorama. Now that I think about it, I didn't have to do it this way. But I kind of like photo collage and trying to get it to connect. Next time I'll do panorama for sure. Anyways, you go and you count everything. You count each car. You count the empty, underutilized rooftop spaces. This lamp post doesn't have any solar power, so it's just pulling from a fossil fuel plant somewhere. Landscaping is also a carbon sink. The leaf blowers, the lawn mowers, the design of these gardens is for appearance. It's not to sink carbon. It doesn't care about carbon use. So I want to design this street to consider carbon use and to try to suck down as much carbon as possible and not release carbon. And here's my vision development. So it can be really simple, and this is a little bit of a fantasy exercise. We'll talk about how to make these things real. But again, you have to start with a vision in order to change anything. You got to see the problem, which is carbon, and you have to have a vision to move forward. And seeing and envisioning is exactly what artists are designed to do. So here I've replaced these big apartment buildings with a farm field or gardening on top, because this is a flat top building. Solar, chicken coops behind here for food independence. Community centers, more trees. This green represents a tram line, different transportation system. And then here's a close-up view. This is a building right next to my apartment. It's just finished. It's designed for cheap fossil fuels. It's luxury condos, very typical in Los Angeles right now. So I envisioned, what would this look like if ordinances were passed and you had to retrofit to sink carbon out of your building? Well, you could take out the road. We'll talk about this concept today. Put planters where people can grow food, public composting bins, community orchard, bean stalks kind of growing on trellises, ivy, solar shading, putting your laundry out. All these things are reducing the carbon footprint immensely of this. Okay? How feasible it is, that's a different story, but it's definitely more feasible than like an intergalactic ring world type thing. All right, you have to then take these designs and present them to your community. This is a real vision development. So this stuff happens all the time in architecture and city planning and urban development, but the whole system is still very much stuck on cheap fossil fuels. So I think artists, climate change is very difficult to get your mind around and takes continued reading and learning. Um, but artists have an ability to quickly generate this type of work and come up with new worlds that are resilient. Okay, let's go draw. So this is a design challenge for you all. It's broad. It's a vision development challenge. You can do it for fun. You can do it for serious. Design a new vision for your neighborhood that is resilient and empowered. Use concept design, drawing, animation, 3D, collage, anything you can get your hands on. And then this is important. Do actually share with your neighbors as much as you can with physical distancing. I talked to some of my neighbors yesterday, and one of them is a chef. And so he has lots of ideas about what he would grow if our street was transformed. And he's aware of the urban gardening going on in LA. And yeah. I have big thanks to Warrior Painters for having me do this demo. It's a very new subject and I've never actually taught this before, so appreciate them hosting. This is some of my information. I have a Patreon series that is all centered around this work. All the work in this series has been funded by my patrons. I have a portfolio and Instagram as well. And I'll be posting a PDF of this lecture in the chat or on the Paint channel or lecture comms, so you guys can look at all the references and things like that. There's some, especially down here in extra references, there's some good information. Okay, so I'm going to transition to actually doing this. Let's just take a pause, and I want to know if anyone has any questions, comments, suggestions, thoughts.
I did have one question actually, since
Please.
I agree with you. Climate change is a really hard topic to get your head around. Do you have any suggestions on how to inform yourself better on this topic?
Yeah, that's a great question, Jojo. So looking at my references here, let's see. The IPCC report is the world consensus of scientists. It's what all the scientists in the world agree on, which it's very hard to get scientists to agree on one thing. So read this. It's maybe 10 pages or so, but it just lays it out. It lays out the situation in very practical terms. This book by Dr. Michael Mann, Dire Predictions, is a visual guide, so it's really good. It shows you graphs for everything, and it shows you what we know, what we don't know, where the margins of error are. Highly recommend this book. And then
Hi, I was just wondering where you're going to be posting your extra references.
So this is in the PDF of this presentation. So I'll post a PDF, and then you can just have all these links. Or you can email me, and I'll send you stuff too. And then climate grief. This is really important because as we, when we're talking about extinction and ecocide, it starts to get really emotional, and we want to stay focused on positive, actionable, realistic, low-tech solutions. So we do have to take care of how we're feeling. For me personally, one of the biggest things is there's a type of climate grief dealing with winter. I'm from Wisconsin, and in 20 to 50 years, if I'm still alive in 50 years, Wisconsin's not going to have the same winter that it ever had in my lifetime. So I'm going to miss that. That's some deep nostalgia there. So while you're reading really intense climate stuff, do self-care, This is a comic book on peak oil. It's a really good comic book, and it kind of shows you how even if you really enjoy fossil fuels, the idea of them, we're still going to run out. It's still going to be harder to extract them and more expensive to extract them. So that's about fossil fuels. This is about our 11-year deadline to make real progress. This is a good one. I should mention this because indigenous people have tons of solutions that modern policies overlook. Many communities, like our system is designed for quarterly results. There are many other models, economic models, that rely on generational results. How are the choices I'm making today going to affect 7 generations? Or, I heard in Japan sometimes they have like 25-year business plans. That's what they're thinking for. So looking at with the internet, humans have so many cool solutions. This is an open field of solutions that we can come up with. Some stuff on diet. This is an artist who I've been really inspired by, Eflam Mercier. He talks about science fiction, and then we've also started this group, Artists versus Extinction. So if you're interested in this realm of vision development and using your art to kind of fight carbon, then join the group and come join the conversation and contribute your vision, because we definitely can't do this alone. We all need each other for this. Does that answer your guys' questions on references?
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Great. All right. So full disclaimer, haven't really done this a bunch. I'm just going to try to rely on what I know of VizDev in terms of, let me see here, process. So, okay, one sec, I want to get my references up. I love PureRef. So I've got a lot of references from the demo. I also have more references here of really cool urban gardening, like using plastic in tires and things like that. I love this thing, whatever that thing is. And then these are fruits and vegetables, well, just vegetables that I think would grow really well. Beans, corn. Oh, sorry. I think this is supposed to have squash in here. Beans, corn, squash, and tomatoes is a traditional concept, like garden layout, because those plants are synergetic. So let's see. So I'm going to have my references over here. I'll be looking at them as I draw. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is this is a photo collage, and I just stepped outside the house, took some photos, and now I want to just establish some perspective. You could totally 3D model this better. You could do a lot better than this. This is a bit of a rush job. But all I'm trying to do is set up some sort of perspective. So I'll put a vanishing point here. Maybe raise it up a little bit. Put a vanishing point there. I'm curving the vanishing lines a little bit to give me some more room. Blender would be a much better option for this. But I'm not too practiced in Blender, so I'd be really curious to see what some of the 3D artists out there could come up with. Okay, so I realized already I started mapping out perspective, but let's take a look at carbon within here. So where's the carbon? Seeing carbon, that's the first step. Just realized I'm going to change that to blue, perspective lines to blue, and carbon lines to red. Okay, well, there are some cars here, and in the demo or the lecture you saw, I ripped up the whole street over here and planted that. So that's carbon producing. This driveway is carbon emitting. You know, since this whole outbreak, I haven't driven many places, and I could almost see, you know, I see the dust collecting on my car, and I could almost see this driveway replaced with something that is a carbon sink. It's going to take carbon out of the atmosphere. So I'm going to rip up this too, and I have to consult with the neighbors, of course. That's a carbon emitter there, and then this driveway here. Landscaping is a carbon emitter because you need leaf blowers, lawn mowers, hedge trimmers. This is how we treat plants. They just like cut that right off because the top was looking a little shabby. They just chopped it off. So we could grow food here. We could grow better things here. Or even just useful flowers, herbs, things like that. Something that's more useful. We have rooftop space. Nothing going on up there. It gets really hot when the sun strikes the front of this building. So we could repurpose this to offer shade. These windows are just open to sunlight, which is nice, you know. I should not complain about sunlight in California. But the problem is this guy up here, air conditioning. When you have to pump that increasingly as the climate continues to warm over the decades, that carbon adds up. Lights. This is a tough issue, you know, and one thing that Donut Economics talks about is how everything is linked. So while this light is nice for safety and security, maybe it could be an automatic light because it also disturbs insects. The mass quantity of lights happening in cities is actually part of the reason insect decline is happening. So maybe something with these. I just see a big flat space like that, and I say that's a canvas. We can use that to sink carbon. Okay, my Photoshop might be glitching out a little bit here. That's all right. Yeah, my Photoshop's been a little laggy. I just put new RAM in here too, so I was hoping it'd be super smooth. Okay, there's water here. We don't get much rain in LA, but water reclamation systems where you could take water and actually put it into a cistern. It might save carbon, it may not. Was there a question? I thought I heard someone. Okay, we're getting near the end here of identifying what we need to change, and then we'll look at what we can replace it with. Another AC unit here. There's another AC unit here and here. And then this whole building as well. Okay, so we've identified the carbon. Let me label that carbon. And I'm going to continue mapping a little bit of a perspective grid. To help with the drawing and the layout process. Now this is just going to end up being a sketch. I may not even get to photo bashing, but you can do a lot just with painting. Most of it with painting. So if this was if this design was chosen to be developed further, like if you showed your neighbors a few designs, and then maybe they pick one, and then you could develop that further. Okay, I may even do a few other things, like just map out some perspective points. So I've got a plane here. I could find the center of that plane. Oh, getting a little lag with that shift draw. Let me try the line tool. All right. Using the line tool to map out some planes. I find it's useful to get these halfway points. In case you want to do something crazy with your space. I'll be honest, my workflow is pretty messy at the start, so I hope you guys can see sort of what I'm thinking here, but feel free to ask questions. Okay, when it gets a little busy, I like to, usually what I'll do is I'll just put a fog over everything. So I'll create a new layer, go to white, cover it up, and then I can play with the transparency. So typically as I start, I need more information, and then as my design overtakes it, then it's more and more the design and less of the reference. Okay, I'm also going to put this carbon overlay on there, put that down low. All right, and let's create a new folder called Solutions. Eolutions. All right, now where to start? I think I'm going to start, I see lots of little technical things to change. I do want to shift the perspective on this building over here. Just, it feels so extreme. This angle here, so for my drawing, I'm just going to like pull that out a little bit and fudge the drawing to work around that. All right, I'm going to start with paint. So the first thing I'm going to do is rip up the road. This road here, I will, using the RGB slider, I'm going to use the selection tool. Maybe there should be a pathway, definitely, for the people who live along the side. Oops. I've been using heavy paint so much, I'm forgetting the Photoshop hotkeys. All right, I'm going to tear up this landscaping, this landscaping. We'll keep that tree. I'm going to tear up the front of this luxury condominium here, and also the street up into my perspective line back there. Keep the sidewalk pathways. Okay.
In the end design, are those cement, or would cement actually take up a lot of carbon?
Yeah, that's a great point, Jason. Because yes, they would take up a lot of carbon. So just throwing it out there, do you have any ideas for what could replace cement as like a realistic walkway?
Just thinking about like maybe gravel, or I mean, maybe even a plant material that can take high traffic.
Yeah, maybe like moss or algae or something like that. I don't know.
Like an actual kind of footpath or something?
Like a mixture of like natural, just like natural stone and like moss and such
Ooh.
things.
Well, I mean, something like a what is it? Dwarf carpet of stars. It's a succulent that is actually really sturdy.
Let's look it
Just
up.
like carpet plants like that would be cool.
Dwarf carpet of stars? Did I hear that
Yeah,
right?
I'm looking it up right now. It looks really cool. And also really cute.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
It's pretty similar to an ice plant.
What's an ice plant?
Those are, well, they're actually, you'll see them in a lot of landscapes.
But those are invasive. At least in some areas.
They are invasive, but people like them on like slopes and things because they don't take any, they don't take a lot of irrigation, and they're really sturdy.
All right. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, guys. So maybe what I'll do then, I'll put a clipping layer on here, and I'll put maybe, you know, where it's trafficked the most, it's just going to be dirt. You know, there's only so much wear that the plants can take. So maybe there's a dirt footpath. And then maybe we have that that dwarf stuff. And you guys can see how easy it is just to play around with ideas of low-tech solutions. Like, this is not really fancy techniques here. So there's maybe some of that stuff. Maybe it tapers off. Maybe there's moss intermingled in there. Moss is a little tricky. Maybe if there's enough tree cover, because it does get really hot and dry. But maybe if there was more trees.
You could use something that is mossy, but isn't like traditional. moss, like like a what is it called? Australian astroturf.
I don't know about that. I'm going to need a list of references from you after this. This is part of the design process, right? You encounter a challenge. Oh, that's really cool. You do some research. You get inspired looking at all this, researching this, learning about it, and then we can implement it. So what I saw there too were rocks kind of intermingling with some of this stuff. It's a little hard to see there. Could have little rock walls. You know, a lot of times we use plastic dividers in our garden. There's so much plastic going on in the garden. We could just use stone. Stone is cheap. We live near a desert. There's got to be some stone. And maybe I'll just change the whole color of this walkway. Let me look at the photos real quick. Or maybe just expand this brighter and more yellow. Oh, and here's a quick and easy trick too that we can play around with, is if you want to put flowers in. Like, I'm not a huge flower person. I'd prefer to grow edible foods, but flowers are awesome as well. And to do that, I like to do the hue jitter, saturation jitter, maybe brightness jitter as well. And let's do a little scattering. And so this should sprinkle different color flowers.
Edible flowers could be an option.
Do you have any favorites?
I think actually, like basil and arugula have pretty little flowers.
Ooh. Basil
Those are things we eat on common, and they do have flowers.
Basil what color are those flowers? Are they like little?
They're like big purple sort of
Big
things.
purple. Okay.
Pansies and marigolds.
All edible.
Amaranth.
And what could be really cool?
Nasturtium.
Chives.
Ooh. Oh, those are purple too, right? They kind of have like little pom-pom.
Cilantro has real delicate little flowers.
Okay, so we're already doing a lot. Just removing the cement, taking away the cars. That's a huge challenge, but it's attainable. It has to be. So next, I'm going to focus on some of these walls, maybe. Let's start from the ground up. How about that? That's a design principle. Okay, so over here, I'm just a huge fan of tomatoes. So I've got to put a big tomato patch. Let me bring my brush back to normal here. All you need are some, wiring, cages, tomato cages. Tomatoes love the heat, they love sun. Perfect for growing here. Maybe some will be ripe. Maybe some will be like little cherries. I do know tomatoes have yellow flowers. So maybe this one's starting to bud. And that's another big thing about this. I haven't mentioned this yet. We've talked about a lot about technology, but one of the biggest things that artists can envision is culture, because most of the changes we need to make to avoid a climate catastrophe are cultural. For instance, if people grew their own food, knew where it came from, knew the growth cycle, if you spend time outside, you're experiencing weather. Many of us, including myself, it's difficult for us to see actual climate changes because we're inside all the time on our computers. And that's real. People used to spend a lot of time outside. Maybe not artists, maybe the monks in the monasteries doing illuminated manuscripts were still inside all the time. But the point is that we're really disassociated with nature and the natural cycles. Tomatoes here. Maybe I do need a little pathway behind here. I do see this water meter. I haven't done the math on how much rainfall this house gets per year. But just for fun, I will put a gutter. For the 2 weeks a year it does rain. I'm losing my tool again here. Does anyone else get lag when they shift click in Photoshop?
Sometimes if it's like a big file.
Okay. It's like still thinking about my past moves there.
What I heard is that the new Photoshop version is being very finicky and laggy, so that might be why.
Okay, that might be it. I'll just rotate the canvas and do it manually. Now a lot of this I'm just approaching with flat color right now because I'm just trying to see how things might fit together. If they work, then that would be a great time to paint it up, render it, 3D model it, animate it. That's one thing that Stephen Shepard couldn't really do in his book, is show animations. But I feel like you could show what your neighborhood would look like in 5 years, 10 years, and then maybe 25 years. And you could show you could show people a way forward. Like, there's no other way to really show people what the future might be unless you really draw it out and animate it for them. So I guess, yeah, here, maybe I'll just put a whole support beam here that the water pipe goes down. Oh, actually, no. I'm going to keep the water pipe over here. But I will put a pole here because why not? You could have vines growing up here. Or planters. So we're working our way up. This rain trough might go to a cistern down here, down in the ground, and then maybe with some solar panels it can lift the water back up and put the water in just some sort of water tower or a basin. Probably won't have that much water. Again, cultural changes. We don't, in our modern society, we never think of harvesting water. It's just, we just turn on the tap. It's pretty great. But it's not sustainable. So for people in rainier climates, water might be a much bigger place to focus on. Okay. So this wall here, we can use the classic leaf brush. Where's the Photoshop leaf brush? I really like that one. I added a bunch of brushes and now I can't find any of them. Let's try this one. All right. So a classic cooling technique is ivy, or plants growing on the structure itself. Now there are issues with that. You know, you can damage the building that way, depending. But I'm sure we have the low technology to figure out a way to put some plant cover on there. Cool things off. Ooh, you know what you could put up here are maybe some wild grapes. You could have a local vineyard. Or maybe just enough grapes to snack on occasionally while you're gardening. So yeah, I'm going to put grapevines all the way around here. Now, we do need the air conditioning, I think, for extreme heat waves, you know, especially with elderly people. They're very susceptible to those. So maybe there will be an air conditioning unit on top that's more efficient than these kind of piecemeal ones. I need to talk to an HVAC expert, or if there's an HVAC expert in the chat, maybe you have some ideas. Little grapes. So I don't know if any of you play Stardew Valley, but I love that game. And sometimes the way I see vision development in terms of climate change is you're kind of doing your own garden like that. You know, when you plan out a garden in Stardew, you have a vision. Or maybe you don't have an exact vision, but you know, you have some vision. And so we can take that same fun playfulness and apply it to the real world. And then for that AC unit that I was thinking about, maybe there's like a unit here that cools like several units. Or maybe this is a heat pump. There's a type of technology out there that can, with pressure, change temperature, I believe. Heat pumps are something to look into because I believe they can heat and cool depending on how they're built. That could be used with solar. What else do we got going here? Now I'm seeing this, I'm seeing railing, and I just automatically I'm seeing a trellis or some sort of support to grow beans. Beans are great. If you've ever grown them, they want to grow really bad. They just start climbing up poles and will expand and expand and expand. And one year we had some that they just kept on giving. Like you'd harvest as many beans as you could eat, and then you'd come back in a couple days and there'd be more. So if you can, if you're not into being outside or gardening or anything like that, if you can try to gamify it, that's a good way to get enthused.
Do you have any examples of how to like gamify it?
That's a great question. Because the hardcore way to gamify it is, and Stephen Shepard has how to do this in his book, and I can answer questions later too, because it is a bit more complex. But what you have to do is you actually have to count the carbon costs. What he has you do is he actually has you sit out on the street and count how many people drive by, so that you get a feel for the traffic in your area, all these different factors, and then you tally it up for the total carbon footprint. So if your carbon footprint is 100 metric tons of some quality, I don't know exactly. I know people in America, I think, produce about 40 metric tons of carbon each year. So if you can gamify that, they think the lowest is like 4 that a human can live without, while producing that amount of carbon. So then the actual design challenge would be, on the hardcore mode, is can you actually go negative? Can you actually go negative 10? Can you start sinking carbon? Otherwise, for me, the gamification is just like having fun, pretending it's like not thinking too much about the dark stuff, and just focusing on what cool solutions we have and what we could do. So treating this whole scenario like a puzzle would be the nice, light way of gamifying it. But if you're actually going to present it, then gamifying it this way could be cool too. I hope that helps.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So you would also count as people for like carbon footprint, like their breathing, or?
Oh no, that's just like that's the average amount of carbon people burn in their daily life.
Okay.
Like driving to work, or ordering delivery, or running the drying machine, things like that.
I read that modern heating system is like a lot of carbon footprint. It's like next to cars that we use.
What is?
The modern heating system.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would believe that, especially up north where it's colder and
Yeah.
where most people live.
So we have to rethink like how to, build houses that are more, I don't know, keep it warmer in the winter and cooler in the summer.
Right, without adding extra carbon, right? That's like the whole difficulty is we can do these things, but then how do you do it in a carbon negative way?
Yeah.
And so heat pumps are actually a thing, and this design is taking into account that we're going to be transitioning out of a fossil fuel system. So like these things can't just be implemented overnight. It takes a lot of time. So the answer to that heating question also is time.
Yeah.
Because
It's a lot of science that we have to look into. Because then, like I always believe in, we should be allowed to grow food at home. Because actually, I think there are some places that they ban it. It's like some state actually ban you from collecting rainwater,
Oh
which is
wow,
ridiculous.
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, and then like you can't raise livestock. Like you can raise chicken in your backyard.
Oh, you actually reminded me. I did want to put a little chicken coop over here.
So yeah, you have to check with your local law to see if they ban it. It makes sense because like the bird flu and stuff, and the sanitation. But then some law are just ridiculous, like the rainwater thing, and like you can't keep a vegetable garden in your house. That would be like so capitalism thing.
Yeah, that's weird. It's like Nestle can just like extract water in a pipeline from public water, but as a citizen, you can't gather rainwater. Like that's and that's where in the donut economic system, if you look at that graph again, she talks about distributive types of societies, and what that means is that the society itself can export. It doesn't rely on constant imports and long distance supply chains. So there are sanitation issues with having chickens, and there's actually negatives to everything we're implementing here, but the design part of it is to find out what's the best way you can do it. How can you deal with the sanitation issues of the chickens, for instance?
Yeah, and like the plants, growing a lot of plants is really beautiful and stuff. But I think people are worrying about like bugs and mold and modern to keep
Yeah,
their
we're just
modern
used
home
like
to keep their modern home nice and clean. I'm like, Asia, we do it all the time.
I don't know about you guys, but like I use bleach. There's a bug in our house yesterday, and I sprayed it with a bleach bottle, and tried and smashed
Bleach
it.
is bleach.
But
Yeah,
it's just our whole
don't waste your
mentality.
bleach.
Yeah.
Don't waste your bleach.
Oh
We
yeah,
need
yeah.
it.
Now's not the time for that, huh?
Yeah, like summer's coming, so like those little gnats and flies are growing everywhere. And I order a bunch of cheddar wood blocks and place it all over my house because I read online that it helps keep like bugs away.
Help keep them away.
But there are still some that they just don't care.
Yeah, the bold ones.
There is plants like and wood that do naturally repel different types of insects, usually the bad ones,
Okay.
Yeah,
like marigolds and such.
Oh,
They'll
okay.
repel certain
I think that
animals.
really also. I
Mint,
think that really
basil.
also.
I read mint and basil, but flies love mint and basil.
They do, but it repels different other ones.
Yeah.
Some of them, as most animals, like, ooh, that's delicious, and others are like, oh my god, keep me away from that.
Yeah, I love growing like herbs, because like buying a bunch of herbs and you only use like one stalk and the rest just go to waste.
Yeah.
You could just
think that
buy like a
also
bunch of
hammers-
tarantulas and just live with them to just get rid of the flies. Or
Yeah, just get all the tarantula webs and just put them on your house.
yeah,
Bam.
you could be like
Problem
a
solved.
crazy tarantula lady.
I think that'd be the
Make
coolest
it-
kind of crazy lady.
Yeah, with a tarantula farm where you could farm like the tarantulas for their venom to make Botox.
When I
Sell
find
it.
when I find a baby daddy long leg, I try to catch it and put it on my plant. I'm like, please,
Save, save it.
please eat all the fly in my plant. But just keep running away, you know.
Eight-Legged Freaks movie.
I'm like, where's all the spider? I need spiders.
I actually got all the ladybugs out of the.
Yeah. And I saw there's a plant called beauty berries that repel flies.
Oh, okay.
So yeah.
See, you guys have so many like ideas right away, and really like interesting ideas of how. And I think one thing that you guys are highlighting in your conversation is that biodiversity is really important, and that like if you just take one thing away, or if you just have one thing, like if you take away all the plants and just grow corn, you're putting unsustainable pressure on that system.
Like the palm forest.
Yeah, like palm forests,
like
even like palm trees in LA, you know, which absorb more water.
Like palm oil plantation is
Oh yeah, those are
in,
crazy to look at.
in cotton plantation is destroy the ecosystem.
Plantations in general.
Have you guys seen like the shrimp farm in Asia?
No, could you
Shrimp?
look at some post some pictures for
I
us?
saw that video one time and I'm like, that can't be sustainable. It's like so vast. I'll try to look it up.
Is it kind of like the salt ponds or salt lakes, but for shrimp, where it's like a whole bunch of little squares? Okay.
Yeah.
I just noticed this tree over here. I'm just gonna put in a big tree.
Big tree. Oh wow, these do look crazy.
I'm gonna check that out real quick. Is this stuff making sense so far to everyone?
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
cool.
Plants are cool.
Actually, what's a good way to learn more about like different types of plants?
Oh, that's a good question. I think gardening. You know, honestly, like start with a garden, and start them from seeds, and read up online, buy books, and test it out. And then once you start a small garden, it's pretty inspiring because then you start to know a little bit more, and it gives you ideas for what to do next year. So you grow stuff, and then you're like, oh, next year I'll change it up, and I'll cycle things out, and I'll do better on this, and I'll, you know. There's lots of books, but yeah, I would say start local. So actually, Jason works at a garden center and is a pro gardener. So maybe he might know as well how to begin your education into plants.
Yeah, totally. Get a job at a garden center. That's the best way. Support your local botanical garden. Visit your and just look at everything more closely. Those would be my tips.
It's almost kind of the same as getting better at art, right? Like just research, getting into it, spending
just
time
being
with it.
interested.
So I'm just doing some potted plants out here. Not really sure what's in them. Probably more herbs. You can never have enough basil. Unless the flies start coming in. Okay. So now I'm going to work my way up. Just going to put kind of a wall of green here. And over here. Now, this is a big empty space. I'm trying to think of like what happens up here. What could that space be used for? Maybe, since I don't know actually how to get on the roof in this building, you could cut a hole in here. It's just like an empty piece of cement hanging out over the edge. You know, this modernist architecture of flat roofs and things like that, and very boxy look, it's all designed partially, well, for aesthetics, right? It's designed for aesthetics, but the only way those aesthetics work is if there's a cheap fuel system funneling it. So we can open that space up. And put maybe a ladder. And maybe since while you're gardening, you don't want to be carrying things up this ladder and like falling, carrying your plants, maybe there's like a railing, maybe there's even a little crane system up here to like haul up dirt or whatever you need. You know, pulleys and levers, it's super old tech, but really efficient. It's the same tech we use in elevators, you know? So I'm trying to avoid doing any rendering on these, but I feel like a little bit of light kind of reaching up into this zone might be nice. Now we're up to the roof. We can continue to investigate down here, but I think in terms of gamifying our carbon, I think we're doing pretty good, you know. Tore up the cement, planting a lot. And so what this means for the people living here is that they're actually going to have to spend a lot more time right around their house. Instead of driving to the grocery store, they might use a portion of that time instead to grow their own crops. So we're saving carbon with this design. Theoretically, of course. And up here, I'm going to put solar panels. Now, I haven't talked a lot about solar yet because it's a little complicated. If you're anything like me, you love technology. And there's actually a thing called technophilia, where you just love technology so much you think it's going to solve everything. And I used to think that about climate change, like, oh, we can just like invent some new cool tech and figure it out like humans always do. But the problem is it's kind of like it's a trap where if you use high-tech tools, you burn more carbon. And so you're essentially just exacerbating the problem while you try to solve it. And that's part of the feedback loop of carbon that's so vicious. So what you have to do is just stop it. Just stop burning carbon. Now, solar panels are tricky, right? Because they cost carbon to produce. So there's this article, I think it's called Why Solar Won't Save the Planet. It's basically arguing like you can't fix everything with solar panels. In LA, the sun is so common, you could still do a lot. Berlin has more solar panels than LA, so at least that's what I saw anecdotally. So I don't see why we couldn't achieve something like Berlin. The real issue with solar, in my opinion, is the lithium. And so, again, every set piece that you design in your vision is going to have pros and cons. And so the issue with lithium is that we don't have enough lithium or access to lithium to build our way out of the problem. of climate change. And it's actually pretty sad. One of the things we have to focus on is there are some companies, I think one of the companies is Nautilus, and they're doing testing, and they're preparing to do deep sea mining. And so it's like strip mining, like we do on mountains, but it's underwater. And there are unknown vast ecosystems down there, and they just want to like drag it all up, get the lithium, and sell it. And so again, this isn't just about climate, it's about ecocide and how humans are just not realizing the strain that they're putting on the systems that keep us alive. So if we drag, the whole seafloor for lithium, that's not a acceptable solution either. So solar can help us a bit. We should definitely maximize that, definitely invest in that technology, but we can't have that false hope that, it'll just cover everything in solar panels and we'll be fine.
Hey, Sean.
Hey.
Do you know the lifespan of solar panels?
It depends on the type. I don't, to be honest. I know some of them they're supposed to last at least 20 to 30 years. Because that's usually how they calculate like the return on investment for them. But that's a good question, Alvin. I don't actually know. Do you know anything about that?
Yeah, I've read 20 to 30. I've also read 15.
Okay. So
Do
yeah.
you know after the lifespan is up, ways to dispose of the solar panels?
That's another big issue. I don't think we have real systems in place for that. I don't know. I know we ship a lot of our e-waste overseas. Yeah, do you know?
Nope, no clue.
Okay, I'm gonna make a note of that then.
Yeah, I'm also
thank you.
The biggest problem with the solar panel recycling is they have cadmium and lead in them, and that stuff is essentially poisonous, so they have to go through a process for recycling.
Why don't you just send it to a paint plant and we can make paint from it?
Actually, that's funny because it stems into the last conversation you guys were having about paints and lead.
And I heard rumors, I don't know where I heard this, but with our extraction of resources, I heard we might run out of titanium white at some point in our lifetimes, which to me as a painter, I cannot live without titanium white.
Yeah, we're running out of sand.
I think there's only one solution. We should just do what they did in the Matrix. Just hook everyone into a machine and just harvest them for energy.
So here we have the body pod that the plants harvest the human energy. No.
That got morbid really fast.
Sorry.
Thanks, James.
I love the Matrix, so.
But hey, we become fertilizers.
Actually, I will bring this up. This is related to New Orleans, which is that a lot of their cemetery is they have these I'm gonna get the words messed up, but they put people in these mausoleums, and they actually cook in the heat, and they come back after a year, and like that's a carbon neutral way to bury someone, because if you're buying an expensive or like a casket and then burning it or things like that, like it costs a lot of carbon to do that when you multiply it across millions of people. So actually having like eco mausoleums is like a real thing. A little morbid for sure, but no area is off the table for redesign?
Yeah, there's like a movement of natural burials, because the way we treat uh, bodies in the US is really toxic. Like they pump chemicals into the body to keep the look, you know, and it's really toxic, and it doesn't do anything. It just take up space, and all the cemeteries taking up space with grass that needs high maintenance and doesn't do anything for the ecosystem. So there's like people who are like choosing natural burials, like some culture, ancient culture, you know, they just leave the body for animals to pick at, and that's the way the body return to nature. And there are businesses that start advertising like, oh, you can choose different ways to, you know, to take care of your body that's more eco-friendly.
Wow, that's really interesting, Amy.
And yeah, there are businesses that start that, and someone suggested that I read on the internet recently that we should have like a burial forest, so you know each person can, you know, be actually like fertilizer for a tree, and then it's like, here's your grandpa, which is this great oak.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
that's really
and
cool.
someone was like, that's how you get a haunted forest. And then another person is like, it's better a haunted forest than a haunted wasteland that, you know, just killing the.
Would you want to put like fruit on that tree?
Why not?
Just eat an essence of your ancestor, and it'll be like some daily ritual.
All the
I
fruits,
mean,
Go there.
all the fruits have their
It's like
face
your
on it.
grandpa.
I mean, why
His
not?
essence
You
is
know,
inside
like,
you.
why not?
Tasty.
It's the circle of life.
You know, we eat the food from the sun, which is a nuclear power plant, you know. So we're actually eating like cosmic nuclear food.
Why haven't I turned into Silver Surfer yet?
Oh, you will. You're close, man.
You need to eat more. You need more.
You sound like my mom, Donna.
I'm Asian.
Technically, everything emits radiation, so.
True that.
We're all made of star stuff.
We are radiation.
Did you,
Spider-Man.
Did you guys know today is International Space Day or something?
Oh, damn.
It is.
I thought it was International Boba Day.
Is it?
Boba was given to us by the aliens.
Is that why someone made like that care emoji, but it's holding a boba?
Wait, Boba Day was yesterday. Boba Day's the 30th. R.I.P.
well, I miss it, so it's gonna be today too.
Every time I like get boba, I kind of
Yeah, technology can help a lot with sustainability too. You know, like recycling energy. Like they are designing devices that you can, like shoes that can harness kinetic energy as you run to charge battery.
Wow.
I mean, it's not a new technology. Like if you watch the movie, there was a movie on Netflix of a boy in another country that used a bike. You know how bike has this like this light that charges when you ride,
Right.
and he used that to build an automatic irrigation system for his town, so people don't have to do the manual labor.
Oh, that's
So
cool.
collecting kinetic energy is not a new tech.
And there's actually a resource called Low Tech Magazine, and they have just like hundreds of things you can build or low tech solutions. So there's definitely like a low tech revolution kind of happening out there. Because if you think about it, humans have been carbon neutral their whole existence, so we actually have a lot of tools that we've learned to use, and we just have forgotten them because now we're like pros at StarCraft, but we couldn't like navigate the desert, you know, most of us.
I don't even know which direction to drive. Like, which was north, which was south.
Yeah.
Oh my god, yeah. People are like, oh, look at the mountains. Which mountain?
But we have GPS though.
I was doing research in environmental sketching class. No, architectural class, CDA. And I came across like Japanese old mechanical doors that use zero energy.
Whoa.
I'll look for that video. So like some factory engineer, he was looking for ways to, you know, move heavy object, but like using less energy, and he came across like these ancient doors that actually like self. It does take some movement, like initial action, but then after that it's just like automatically wind up and move.
That's really cool.
Yeah, he applied that to this table at work to like carry like really heavy object across the floor without zero electricity, just using kinetic energy.
I would love to see that, if you can find that video.
Yep.
So here I'm putting up, you know, these are luxury condominiums being built. Here, I doubt that they want urban gardening to just explode all over their building. They're nice, clean design. But I'm just gonna imagine that the community is together on this, that, you know, there's been a couple heat waves and people are like, okay, we need to cool off our area. We need to be more, you know, when heat waves strike LA, sometimes we have a power blackout. So again, there's a feedback loop of it's too hot because of climate change. Well, we burn a lot of fuel to keep the air conditioners running, and that shuts down our power grid during the heat wave. So there's these negative feedback loops that I think once everyone agrees on, like the solutions around them, then these types of things could be possible. All right, Photoshop's lagging a little more. All right, so we're nearing the final 10 minutes or so of this lecture. I'm gonna keep just painting some clotheslines and tinkering around here, but I'm happy to answer any questions, or if you guys want to see something painted in here, just let me know.
I do have a question. So how do you go about like actually implementing this kind of stuff into your neighborhood? So like, I guess like everyone in your condominium like agrees on this, but like, as you said, like there's like site buildings and stuff. I don't know about like city ordinance stuff, but like, yeah, like how do you deal with that stuff?
That's an awesome question, because we as artists can we can imagine and visualize things forever, but then it's like, okay, how do you actually make a production happen? How do you actually get all the things you need lined up, all the teams lined up to make a production real? So Stephen Shepard goes through this intensively in his book, and it's cool because he's actually done this work before. He actually used to do it for fossil fuel companies, where he would work with a fossil fuel company and a community to plan a new plant or a mine or a drilling situation. So he says you have to start local. And that really means like your neighbors, just talking with them, seeing what their thoughts are, especially the older people, because they are more likely to have noticed actual changes that are maybe too subtle for younger people to notice. So once you do that, you come up with something like this, you know, and I'm going to show my neighbors this just, I don't know, just for fun, and see what they like or don't like. They are your client. Your community is your client. And Jojo, I think the way to approach this, you know, as with any client-driven project, is the artist is serving the community here voluntarily at this first step. And then once you get community feedback, you go up to the next level. So you actually go to the way Stephen Shepard talks about it. Because he did this a lot in Vancouver as well. Vancouver's like one of the best examples to look at for urban development around climate change. But you start with your block. And then you, oops. Let me just do it this way. Okay, you start with your block, and then you do a 6 to 8 block vision development, expanding out. And then you can do a little more, but then once you get out of 8 blocks, you're not really as local anymore. So then you have to work with engineers, like real architects, real engineers, real local politicians like aldermen or like city council people. And it's important to remember that the artist doesn't have to do all of that. It's not like the artist has to go up at the podium and present in front of the LA City Council, because this design process is collaborative. It has to be collaborative, and it can't just be one person's vision. It has to be the community's. And once you have community consensus, that's when real things can change. And to me, that seems pretty daunting. Like, I'm an introvert, and meeting all those different types of people, dealing with all that stuff seems intimidating to me.
I got you.
Yeah, Alvin, you're an engineer, right?
Yeah, I used to be.
See, everyone knows an engineer. They're out there building stuff all the time. And then you actually have to do studies. Like, you actually have to have scientists come in and test your model and see if it will really work. And then once you have consensus, research, then you can implement it. But it does start with a vision. So for instance, in Vancouver, their big issue was, I think this was in the 90s, they asked, do we expand and make suburbs, or do we lock off the city and say you have to build up, you have to build vertically? Because when you build vertically, you create higher density, and you have lower carbon costs. So if your city is all clustered in a knot here, it's very efficient to get around. Whereas if you have a suburban kind of thing with all these winding roads leading in, it's very expensive carbon-wise. So in the 90s, I think it's the 90s, they decided to go with this model, and they actually preserved a lot of forest because of that. They preserved a lot of ecosystem because of that. So these things are achievable. And I hope to do more demonstrations on this. I mean, I'm gonna do my block, I'm gonna do 6 blocks, and then I'm gonna try seeing how far I can take this thing. It's a little frustrating for me since I don't know how long I'm gonna live in LA. These are just unknowns, so it would be hard for me to really propose this and be like, I'm gonna live here for the rest of my life. This is what I want you guys to do. Um, but I hope that what this demo has showed is that you can use your visual design abilities to create a sustainable community. It has to start with a vision. So the other stuff can come later for sure, but it has to start with the idea, just like the VizDev design process. So
I feel like it's really hard for a lot of the LA residents to be able to create that, like turn their spaces into green spaces, because a lot of the people that live there like rent and stuff. But I do have some friends in Koreatown, and I just thought that was really interesting to mention. But there's like plots of land that you could buy for farming and stuff. And then
cool.
Yeah, I don't know if any of you guys are in LA, but if you guys want to get more into creating green spaces and just gardening stuff, since there's not a lot of rooms in a lot of people's spaces, and there's not a lot you could do without like landlord permission.
Right.
Yeah.
So you said that's
So there's
Koreatown vacant lots?
Yeah, Koreatown has like some vacant lots that you could rent out and use for planting stuff. And there's also this person from one of my classes I love and stalk a lot, and I found out that they're like a worm person.
Oh. Like they're part worm, part person?
Yeah, they are a worm person. Where do I put this? I think I'll put this in the general. It's really creepy because like we're not friends, but I want to be friends with them.
I'm a worm person.
Worm person.
We could all be worm people.
We are worms.
I would love to be a worm person. Yeah, but I think they're also located in Koreatown. But I think I think it's really difficult talking to neighbors in an apartment complex, since you can't really do much like permanent stuff with the space. But
yeah,
if you look, I feel like there might be some more resources to, at least this one, making worm poop.
Yeah.
It's the best fertilizer for veggies.
Great.
Yeah, I just started. Me and my partner, we kind of started like doing a decomposition thing. What are they called? Oh, compost. Yeah.
How's it going so far?
We haven't flipped it for a while, but it's looking okay. It's looking dirty.
It saves so much produce that you'd otherwise throw in the trash, though, right?
Yeah, definitely. Like it's like a totally separate thing. Yeah.
That's
it's
awesome.
Good.
That's awesome. And I think that's a good point. Also, like it's hard in our society, especially as renters, to make these changes. So I just want to lay out like a realistic timeline. The IPCC report says we basically have 11 years now, 10, 9.5, to make like gargantuan strides. But I think that this could be possible in 10 years. I don't see why. LA is pretty progressive too. There's a lot of difficulties, with the earthquakes and fires and things like that, and the policy side of this is like a labyrinth. But I think if you can even start a conversation with your neighbors and local people, you might be surprised at how things could come together in some meaningful way. So yeah, who knows? It's worth a try, right? Okay, well, I'm going to wrap this up because I actually got to go call my grandpa. But please feel free to email any of your questions, any of your thoughts. I'll post the whole PDF in the lecture comms here after the lecture, so you can have all that information. But thank you so much, and thanks for the Warrior Painters for hosting.